Tom Goodman-Hill. You are now an Emmy-nominated actor for Baby Reindeer. Congratulations. How does it feel?
Yeah, it still doesn't sound quite real, which is yeah, I'm not sure I'll ever quite get used to it. But it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm thrilled to be nominated. Yeah, yeah.
How did you find out?
I found out when my agent rang me, and I think we both screamed at each other. So that was, which was fun. Yeah, yeah, it's extraordinary to find out. Yeah, I was at home and just not expecting anything really, and yeah, I was thrilled to bits. It's extraordinary. It's an incredible group of nominees, and I'm just honored to be among them. It's fantastic.
Mhm. And also, I feel like everyone I've talked to who's been involved with the show, like they had no expectations about, for the show and like the reception it's gotten. So just to have these nominations for you guys just must be incredible, like icing on the cake, right?
Yeah, from day one, I think we'd made a show that we all believed in, and we knew it was an important story to tell, and we knew how great the scripts were. But such as the subject matter and the kind of story that it's telling, you don't really expect there to be a huge audience for that. And we really weren't expecting a huge audience for that. So for it to blow up the way it did was, I mean, it was incredible. It was testament to the quality of the work, which is fantastic, and testament to how interesting and unusual a story it is, and just great that it chimed with so many people. But it's extraordinary that it chimed globally. I mean, that was we thought it might hit a good audience in the UK, maybe across Europe, and maybe it would get some viewers in the US. But for it to go completely crazy was like nothing anybody could have expected.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, for you, Darian is such a tricky and difficult, I guess you could also say, character to play. He's obviously the villain and just so repulsive.
Yeah.
But what were your first thoughts about the character when this project first came to you?
Yeah, when I got that script for episode 4, which obviously forms the basis of Darien, I just thought it was an astonishing piece of writing. And the first thing that struck me was that Richard hadn't written Darien as an out and out villain. He'd written him as a real human being. And so that was fascinating to me, that everyone in Baby Reindeer has their flaws, and everyone in Baby Reindeer has their saving graces. Although I think it's hard to find any in Darien. But what marked Darien out was his charm and his status, and the fact that he was capable of maintaining that status and that unflappable charm in spite of everything that he was doing. And it was finding that character that was so appealing to me, was trying to find a villain who didn't appear to be a villain, because if he appeared to be a villain, he would never have got away with what he was doing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And like most predators are like that, right? They have to woo you and bring you in somehow, get you under their thumbs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a classic case of grooming, Darren. What he's doing to the young, naive, needy, desperate, ambitious Donnie is to groom him and tell him he can have everything that he desires if he sticks with Darian,
Mhm.
which is a classic case of grooming.
Yeah. Oh, well, what did you and Richard discuss about the character? Obviously, this is based on his real life experiences, but fictionalized characters as well. Like, what do you discuss? And you discuss at all anything from his real life that was probably incorporated in the show?
We always talked about the script as an original script and rehearsed it as such. And but obviously, I wanted to talk to Richard about the emotional journey more than anything, because it's such a rapid escalation within the episode, what happens between them, and you have to grade that in such a way that it tells the story while remaining believable. So we had, I mean, we never stopped talking, me and Richard. We were talking all the time, and that formed the basis of the relationship, because the more we talked, the more natural we got, and the more natural we got, the more comfortable the relationship between Darian and Donnie became, which it had to be. Appalling though it is, it had to be a comfortable relationship. So yeah, Richard and I talking constantly formed the basis of that. And then we were lucky enough to have Veronica Tefilsko, the director, because she was brilliant at making sure she was shooting the scene and working with us and directing us in as sensitive and careful a way as possible, so that she just framed everything to allow Richard and I to do what we needed to do. And without Veronica there as well, I think anyone more invasive or less attuned to the delicacy of the material, I think, would have been very difficult in that situation. But Veronica was extraordinary. So it was, yeah, it was incredibly hard to do, but kind of holding each other's hands was the only way to do it. And I was holding Richard's hand constantly because it was, I mean, the whole thing was triggering for him, but those scenes in Darian's apartment were horrific. There's no other word for it. So, yeah.
I feel like it's such an interesting way. Maybe it was different for you, like filming it through, you know, there might be more gaps in between filming, but just as a viewer experiencing the show, like you're only in 2 episodes, and the big one's obviously 4. And but like you were saying, we get the full story of what happened, and it's so intense to watch. Like we see how, you know, he's so charismatic, and you know he woos, like Donnie brings him in, and then the abuse happens and it's horrific. And but what was it like for you guys to, you know, really to film that, and that you knowing you need to accomplish so much in that one episode?
Uh, yeah, there was an intensity to the filming that I've never experienced before. Because there's, you know, obviously there's a lot of drug taking, there's a lot of abuse. There's also some very intricate, beautifully written dialogue scenes between them when Darian is, you know, pretending to nurture Donnie's work. And so there's an extraordinary breadth to the scenes, from something that appears to be very warm and friendly to something that is utterly aggressive and abusive. So we had to calibrate that right the way through the filming, and that made it an incredibly intense process. And it was non-stop. I mean, the whole time that I shot Darian, I didn't meet any other member of the cast. I briefly saw Jess Gunning once on the unit base and said, "Hey, how's it going?" She was going, "My God, how are you?" You know, and and that was kind of it. And the rest of the time it was just me and Richard and, you know, Veronica and the crew, all of whom were extraordinary and all of whom were upset themselves. You know, it was an incredibly upsetting thing for everyone to go through, to see the leading man on the show that they're making going through this horrible process all over again. It was incredibly hard. I've never known anything like it.
Mhm.
I don't imagine I ever will know anything like it again. I certainly don't want to. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a unique, very, very unique show, and especially the way he told it. And also in the 4th episode, there's a sequence in which Darian does this dance in front of Donnie in a robe. It's to you're laughing, Tuffy Marathi, and it's very tribal and like predatory. And like, what was it like shooting that? And you know, did you have a choreographer, or are those your dance moves?
Yeah. I was very grateful for a choreographer, Colleen Mueller. She was fantastic. She we had a day in a studio trying to work out what we were going to do with that when it came to it, and there were all kinds of ideas. There's all kinds of like little video clips of various versions of that dance, ones that kind of got ditched and others that were kept. And then on set, you know, Richard had this sort of idea that all the moves that Colleen and I had worked up together were great, but they needed to be like fevered. You know, they needed to feel like a kind of drug haze. So everything kind of went up in the beat of it went up, but it sort of tripled. So it became this kind of feverish dance, which felt trippy to Donnie, so that he could sit there and go, "What on earth is this guy doing?" You kind of can't see the picture in front of you. So he had this, you know, Richard said he had this image in his head of a Francis Bacon painting where the head is kind of pulled in all different directions and he can't quite work out which one is Darian's real head. And so that was the feel, is that I'm trying to I'm glimmering, you know, I'm trying to
Yeah,
haze.
because it's also like, is that actually what you look like, or is it just his drug induced stupor? that's
Yeah, no, exactly.
exaggerating
You
everything.
just don't know. You're never quite sure. And there are very subtle things immediately after, like blacking out my pupils and painting the corridor deep red that add to that feeling that you're not quite sure whether Darian is a human or a demon, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
And of course he's both. So
Hmm. Well, the show is told primarily from Donnie's POV. I mean, all of it is, and we only see Darian through his POV and his interactions with him, and we don't really know anything else about him except that he's a successful writer and groomer and abuser. But did you, yeah, as an actor, create more of a backstory for him at all?
yeah, I did. I was very aware that I had to stay true to Richard's real life experiences, but also very aware that I had to create the experience of Donnie. And so when I was reading it, I was constantly thinking how Darian would work and how I could create an original character that was believable, charming, as unvillain-like as possible for as much of the time as possible, so that anyone who isn't really prepared for what's going to happen or who might not see it coming just doesn't see it coming, so that you just have no idea that Darian is the monster that he is. So I mean, luckily, Richard's writing is so extraordinary. You can do so much with what's on the page. You can really play with the dialogue and the situations so that you can create a character that is both real and unreal. And I felt that particularly in episode 8 when you return to Darian. Darian has this extraordinary ability just to have utter deniability and complete lack of memory of everything that has happened, and believes that he can quite happily return to square one. And you can only do that if you've created a character who everything just slides off him. He's full charm, completely in
It's
control of
also like
himself.
that confidence and ego, like to know that he will get away with it. Like he's so confident that he's not going to get caught, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
His ego is beyond anything you can imagine. It's extraordinary.
Hmm. And I mean, your final scene in the finale, I think, when Donnie goes to confront him, people think, Donnie's gonna yell in his face and like, oh, he's gonna get his comeuppance in some way, and it's like gonna be triumphant for Donnie, but it's the opposite, right? Like you were saying, like Darian offers him a job and he accepts it. And so what was your take on that? I thought that was such a bittersweet way to put a button on the Darian story.
Yeah, I mean it's utterly tragic. There's no other word for it, because you're right. I think when you're watching Donnie going to Darian's apartment, you imagine that he's going to attack him or give him an earful at the very least and let him know exactly how he's made him feel. And the moment the door opens, you sort of get this feeling that that's not going to
You
happen.
just kind of feel it evaporate from Donnie's
Yeah,
body once it opens.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like you're gonna do it, and it's like, oh, like he's
yeah,
maybe not.
yeah. And the more the scene goes on, the more glib Darian is, the more charming and at ease he is, the more Donnie is sort of convinced that maybe it didn't happen. And so him accepting the job again feels appalling, but it also feels right that Donnie is so glimmered, so charmed, so groomed by Darian that he can't see any other reality.
Hmm. And then as for the final scene of Donnie in the bar, I feel like everyone has a different interpretation of that. I love that ending. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean it's Martha all over again.
Yeah.
But I think it's not it. Obviously, that's sort of one of the things that you take from that. But I think the other is simply the fact that everything that has happened to him makes Donnie then utterly bereft of any hope. And so anyone offering him any kind of help, charm, comfort is going to be he's going to get the doe eyes, because there's nowhere else for Donnie to go at that point. He's at rock bottom. So which of course was Richard's whole point in telling this story, is that you have to go full circle so that you understand Martha, so that you understand that Martha is only that person because she has clearly received appalling abuse in her turn, and it's a cycle, and that as long as that cycle is allowed to continue, there's no way out of it.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Well, lastly, like you were saying before, you were so detached from the rest of the cast and also just from the
Yeah.
storyline itself. So what was it like when you finally watched the show and also met everyone else who worked on it?
Um, yeah, that was strange. I mean, I haven't actually watched the finished
Oh.
show. I
Are you
didn't
one of those
actually.
people who doesn't like to watch their work?
You know what? I'm not that guy, actually. I sometimes do and I sometimes don't. But this one, I was sent the final cut of episode 4, and I did watch that because they wanted me to see it before I went and did the additional dialogue recording. And so I watched that final cut, but it had nothing else on it. It was just a cut, and I thought, okay, I don't need to watch that again.
Right. No, no one needs to watch that again,
No,
really.
you just don't need to. You just
Yeah.
don't need to. So I saw that, and then it was so strange because I was at home, and it dropped on Netflix, and I hadn't seen anybody since filming apart from going in to do the ADR session, and I hadn't seen Richard, I hadn't seen Jess, although we WhatsApped each other every now and then, and so it kind of exploded, and I was just at home. I was doing the school run with my son. I was at home with my wife. I was just like going from day to day, and it was just the weirdest thing that it just exploded, and I was just, oh, here we are. It's the school day. It's time. I'm at home. I'll go and do Pilates. I'll do my usual thing. I'll do the school run, and everything will be fine. And I just kind of, I guess I was grateful that apart from on the school run where quite a few parents recognized me, which was, difficult, I largely managed to go about my life unrecognized, and I was able to kind of hide for the time that it was exploding. And I was glad that, I didn't do any press on the show. And so therefore I wasn't already very visible, because he's the vitriol for Darian is extraordinary. And so which I'm kind of proud of. I'm pleased that people hate him so much because they should. But I managed to sort of personally escape it.
You
Yeah,
you compartmentalized everything from that. I think that's healthy.
yeah, I think so. I
Yeah.
think so. I think my therapist might say something else, but I think it's pretty healthy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Tom, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time and congratulations on the nomination and everything.
Thanks, Joyce.
Thank
Really
you.
great to talk to you.